Hello there, Homeschool Nolan here to help you navigate learning in the digital age. This month marks the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and today, as a homeschooling parent, I'd like to share some thoughts of what I feel young people growing up today should remember about Pearl Harbor. But before talking about Pearl Harbor, I'd first like to share some thoughts on another solemn anniversary that recently passed. And that is the 20th anniversary of 9/11 back in September. This past September the 11th, my son and I attended a memorial service in my community remembering the heroes and victims of 9/11. While there, I couldn't help noticing that in attendance were teenagers who weren't even alive when those attacks happened and therefore have no memory of it. Also in attendance was one veteran and survivor of the Pearl Harbor attacks who was well over 100 years old. I told my 9-year-old son that one day he will be able to tell his grandchildren that he once saw a veteran of Pearl Harbor. That would be as if my own grandfather had told me he once saw a veteran of the U.S. Civil War. I bring this up because I think it makes a profound difference if you experienced a major historical event as it happened versus merely reading about it in history books. It makes a huge difference if you were actually in New York City or Pearl Harbor on those fateful days. And even if you weren't there, perhaps you knew someone who was. Or maybe you simply watched in horror as the Twin Towers fell live on your TV screen. I, of course, was not alive on December 7th, 1941. But when I was growing up, just about everyone knew someone who had fought in World War II. I still sometimes think of a father down the street and a teacher at my old elementary school. Those who had fought and experienced the war firsthand cast a huge shadow over my generation as we were growing up. Now, 80 years after Pearl Harbor, the generation that served in World War II will soon become a once hardy, brave, and patriotic, but now lamented and departed race of ancestors. I borrowed this from Abraham Lincoln. In 1838, Abraham Lincoln, as a young man, gave a famous speech to the Young Men's Lyceum of Springfield, Illinois. In this speech, a young Abraham Lincoln lamented how the generation that fought for the American Revolution and had bequeathed the blessings of liberty were now gone. And he wondered whether the next generation would be able to live up to the task of inheriting the fundamental blessings and responsibilities of liberty. Later in Lincoln's lifetime, of course, the United States plunged into civil war. And then 80 years after the Civil War came the attack on Pearl Harbor. The United States has, of course, fought in many other wars. But those three wars, the American Revolution, the Civil War, and World War II, represented existential threats to the survival of the United States. And they were all about 80 years or a lifetime apart. So as we now pass through the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor and World War II, it is now up to our generation, those who grew up learning from the World War II generation, to pass on their important lessons to the next generation. Kids today should be aware that there was a time when the United States was a much weaker country than it is today, both militarily and economically, and that most Americans in 1941 did not want to go to war, and that the United States tried to remain neutral even as fascism and military aggression were raging across Europe and Asia. Yet when war came, the generation that grew up poor in the midst of a Great Depression left their farms, their shops, and their office buildings to fight in faraway places like Okinawa and Omaha Beach so that future generations could be free. That's something that all of us should remember. But there's another painful, and most would say shameful, lesson from Pearl Harbor that must also never be forgotten, and that is the internment of innocent Americans of Japanese descent into concentration camps. After Pearl Harbor, anger against Japanese people led President Roosevelt to order about 120,000 Americans of Japanese ancestry to be imprisoned in these detention camps. Now, as a kid, I didn't learn about these camps from my history teacher. Instead, I learned about them from my science teacher. When I was in 7th grade, we went on a science field trip to the Lava Beds National Monuments in Northern California. Nearby was a relocation center that was once used to detain Japanese Americans. My science teacher, Mr. Gamble, made sure we passed by it. I still remember him angrily denouncing those camps and making sure we knew that no German or Italian Americans were ever held there. I don't remember him saying so, but I feel that he probably had a childhood friend that was sent to one of those camps. There are still many survivors of those camps living today, and their stories must never be forgotten either. There is probably no better teacher of history than those who actually lived through history. But if you're looking for a good book to teach your kids about Pearl Harbor, I found What Was Pearl Harbor from the Who HQ series to be pretty good. It does a good job explaining the events and causes that led up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, and also what happened afterwards, including a section on the Japanese-American internment camps. If you're a parent around my age, we are the last generation that remembers the World War II generation. And I hope this video has been helpful as you pass on your wisdom and knowledge of history to your own kids. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.